This is the unbelievable story of a 20-year-old boy who sued Pepsi for getting a $32 million fighter jet, and it all started in the 1990s when Coca-Cola was a market leader while Pepsi was an underdog in the soft drink industry. Pepsi was doing everything it could to beat Coca-Cola and dominate the market. At that time, Pepsi's marketing department came up with a crazy idea to increase Pepsi's sales. The concept was simple. When you buy Pepsi, Pepsi points are awarded. You can go to any local store and redeem these Pepsi points for items like t-shirts, leather jackets, sunglasses, etc. However, these prices were not unique. Many other companies were running similar campaigns at that time. So Pepsi needed something unique for the campaign to stand out and spark widespread discussion. So they came up with a huge grand prize. Yes, a Harrier fighter jet. If you collect 7 million Pepsi points, you can win a military fighter jet. But it was impossible to collect 7 million Pepsi points because if you buy a case of 12 Pepsi cans, all you get is only 5 Pepsi points. So it would take 16 million Pepsi cans to get 7 million Pepsi coins. No one could ever buy that many Pepsi cans. But they had no idea they were about to run into a major problem. At that time, there was a boy named John Leonard, a 20-year-old boy with big dreams and big aspirations who did all kinds of side jobs like newspaper boy, delivery boy, window washer and so on. One day he came across this Pepsi ad while watching the TV. The advertisement completely blew his mind because it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for a 20-year-old boy like him. He saw it as an opportunity to change his life forever. He realized that he needed a plan to execute it and get the jet. He couldn't stop thinking about his plan and start looking at every possible way to make it happen. He discovered that a Harrier jet actually costs around 32 million. So if he could win the challenge, he would be able to get the Harrier jet for a lot less than it was worth. So he began to do the math to figure out how much would it cost and how many cans of Pepsi he needed to buy to earn the 7 million points. At first, John and his mom tried to buy as much Pepsi as they could and drink it at home. But as you might expect, after a week, they were unable to drink any more Pepsi at home. Eventually, they realized it was impossible to win the challenge because if they had to make 7 million points, they would have to drink 190 Pepsis per day for 100 years to make it happen. He also realized it wasn't easy as he thought, and most importantly, he needed a large amount of money to do this, which he could never imagine having. So he began looking for various potential ways to get the money he needed for this task. Fortunately, John had a friend named Todd Hoffman. He was a businessman who did multiple business like the car business, restaurants, real estate and so on. He believed that Todd would help him with the money needed for this crazy adventure. One day, with high hope, he called Todd and pitched the idea. But after hearing the idea, the response he received was not what he expected. Todd thought John was crazy and said it was not possible to win this challenge. John tried to convince him in every possible way, but Todd was not ready to invest the money. But when John showed him the ad, he couldn't believe his eyes because there was no disclaimer in the advertisement. Usually, these kinds of advertisement would always have a disclaimer, but in this advertisement, there was no such disclaimer. He played the advertisement over and over again, but still there was no disclaimer. Todd suddenly asked John to write a business plan and bring him all the details of how they would profit from it. John calculated how much money it would take to purchase all the Pepsi cans, including transportation, storage and labor costs. The cost absolutely shocked them. To earn 7 million Pepsi points, they needed to purchase 16 million Pepsi cans and the estimated cost was $4 million US. Todd had no idea that the cost would be this high. Not only that, there were so many uncertainties like whether owning a fighter jet might be illegal, what if they don't get the points in time, or what if Pepsi ends the contest before they complete it. Neither of them could find answers to these questions. So Todd decided not to invest the money. But John tried hard to change his mind. He suggested various potential ways to generate money using the fighter jet, such as using the jet for air shows, advertisement, movies, and a variety of other purposes. But Todd wasn't ready to listen to any of it. He was adamant in his decision. John was extremely disappointed. He felt completely lost. All of his hopes and dreams had been shattered. The regret of not being able to get the fighter jet was weighing heavily on him. The thought of going back to his old life, washing windows and selling newspapers for a living really haunted him. He finally decided to give up on the challenge and move on with his life. But one day, while he was shopping in the nearby store, he noticed a big statue displaying the Pepsi campaign, and on that he found a catalog. He went through it. But at the end of the catalog, he noticed something that was about to change his life forever. What's up people, this is John Joseph, welcome to TED. Buy as many Pepsi points as you want for 10 cents each. That was the line written in the catalog. John couldn't believe his eyes. He discovered that he now doesn't have to buy Pepsi cans. Instead, he could buy Pepsi points, instantly reducing the cost of completing this challenge from $4.3 million to $700,000. He was really shocked by what he saw. He called Todd as soon as possible to inform about this. Todd was also shocked because they found a loophole that nobody saw. Todd immediately wrote a check for $700,000 and they both went to a fulfillment center in Young, America to send the check to the Pepsi headquarters for the Harrier jet. Everyone at the headquarters was both shocked and surprised because they never expected someone to take their advertisement literally and come to claim the fighter jet. They simply couldn't believe that someone really believed their ad and sent a check. A few days later, John received a letter from Pepsi. With all the curiosity in the world, he opened the letter. The letter said, "Thanks for the effort. Ha ha ha, it was meant to be a joke. For your troubles, here's coupons for 2 cases of Pepsi." John got really pissed off. He considered this letter to be extremely rude and mocking him as an idiot. Finally, they made the decision to go the legal route. Todd brought in his lawyer in Miami, whose name was Larry Shantz. John and Todd went to Larry's and paid the advertisement in front of him along with a group of other lawyers. They knew that going up against a large corporation like Pepsi was difficult and dangerous, but the lawyers found it to be a legit case because the advertisement said 7 million Pepsi points for a Harrier jet and there were no disclaimers on it. They wrote to Pepsi as soon as possible saying, "See, you guys have made the offer for the Harrier jet and we have met all your requirements, so please deliver the Harrier jet." For months, both Pepsi's and John's lawyers would continue to negotiate, but nothing changed. Pepsi did not provide a solution to the problem. But one day, John came to know that Pepsi had sued him in the federal court in New York. John and Todd were shocked. They didn't have any idea why Pepsi sued him. Later, they realized that Pepsi had sued them first because if a lawsuit were filed, the proceedings would be done in New York, where their headquarters were located. So it would be beneficial for Pepsi. Their main argument in the lawsuit was it was not legal for anyone to buy a Harrier jet, and for the offer to be legitimate, it had to be legal. John's lawyer suggested that they should sue Pepsi back, so they did. Meanwhile, the marketing team at Pepsi was told to change that. So they changed the points from 7 million to 700 million points, and under that they wrote, "Just kidding." As the situation got worse, Pepsi's lawyers called John and Todd for a settlement conference. They stated that they were willing to offer them $750,000 with the possibility of going up to $1 million. But according to John's calculations, the jet was worth $32 million and they were offering only $1 million to settle, which was not even close to the original price. So he was not willing to take their offer and made his final decision that he wanted the jet and not the money. Pepsi's lawyers got furious as he was not willing to take their offer, so they threatened to beat him at court. As a result, John and Todd decided to change and level up things. They realized they needed someone who could compete with Pepsi, and it was Michael Avenatti.
Michael Avenatti.
Mike Avenatti.
Michael Avenatti.
Well, I knew him as Mike Avenatti.
Avenatti.
Who was a brilliant lawyer proficient in these kinds of cases. Michael's strategy was to put public pressure on Pepsi on John's behalf using some aggressive public relations actions. He assisted John in coordinating all of the media and increasing his visibility on radio and television. At last, the media took the bait. The word quickly spread, and John's issue blew up into a major problem. Everyone started talking about it, putting significant pressure on Pepsi, and it started affecting their reputation. So Pepsi did everything they could to prevent John from telling his story to the public. But every radio station in the market as well as major media outlets such as CNN and CBS came to interview John.
A college student says his dreams of a Harrier jet have been grounded.
What Pepsi didn't count on was this college student whose thick binder is filled with his plans to win the Harrier.
I want the prize I'm entitled to, and I love Pepsi stuff. You know, it sounds like I'm putting the PR spin on, but it's the truth.
But like any other story, John's story also faded over time. The public almost forgot about John and stopped talking about the issue. But Michael came up with a controversy called Pepsi number fever. Pepsi Number Fever was a marketing campaign run by Pepsi in the Philippines. When you buy a Pepsi, you might find a lucky number to win 1 million Filipino pesos under the cap of the Pepsi bottle. However, the campaign utterly failed because multiple people won the same lucky number and Pepsi claimed that it was a computer error and they could not award the 1 million pesos. This resulted in huge protests and riots in the country and some people were even killed. Actually, it was a controversy that had happened years ago that Pepsi didn't want people to talk about. By doing so, Michael believed that he could draw people's attention back to this problem and ignite the situation. Michael's plan was to blackmail Pepsi by threatening to use Pepsi number fever story against them and run an ad campaign to change public opinion. But when the idea was presented to Todd Hoffman, he did not like it and thought it was blackmail. This created a conflict between Todd and Michael, and the situation escalated to a point that John was forced to choose one of them to move the case forward. With years of friendship and as a man who believed him from the beginning, John chose Todd going forward, and Michael Avenatti was fired as their lawyer. They knew the time was passing. It had been 3 years since John first saw the advertisement, but he still had not received the fighter jet. They were extremely frustrated and realized it would be foolish to wait anymore. So they searched for a new lawyer in New York, and they found one whose name was David Nachman. He was a very successful complex litigation attorney, and their next step was to get the case in the front of a jury. A jury is a group of people chosen to listen to the facts of a trial in court and decide whether a person is guilty or not. So if John could convince the judge to put this case before a jury, he would be in a very good position and have the highest probability to win the case. But for Pepsi, this was a nightmare because they knew if the case went to a jury, John would win. This is where things took an unexpected turn. Pepsi convinced the judge not to put a jury on the case and got the judge to make a judgment. This was a huge blow to John and the lawyer. It was the year 1999. After 4 years of legal quarrels, the day of the final judgment had arrived. Everyone was looking forward for the final verdict. The court stated that the case was not worth pursuing. They declared that it was John's fault for taking the advertisement literally and believing that he could win the jet. A reasonable person would not have taken the offer of the fighter jet as a prize seriously. In addition, the judge stated that no school would make a parking space for a student's fighter jet. That was the end of John's dreams. Finally, he lost the case and Pepsi won the trial. He now believes he should have accepted the 1 million settlement earlier.